Good morning, everyone. Those who know me well know that I like to tell stories. So we're at dinner last night with my speechwriter and my aide and Colonel Gilbo, my Director of Public Affairs, who it brings me great joy to always embarrass her at these public speaking events. And Trish is like, "Hey, sir, look at this new video we're working on. What do you think?" I said, "I think we should play that tomorrow." And she's, "But sir, it's not even rendered yet." So sometime between 6 o'clock last night and 8 o'clock this morning, the video got rendered, submitted to Ascend, and incorporated into the presentation. So Trish knocked it out of the park again. Those 6 Space Force truths are the truths that General Saltzman published last December at the Space Power Conference. And it's really important because it helps a Guardian understand how they fit in the service that is the Space Force as well as the military. And I'll touch on that a little bit. But for over 60 years, AIAA has ignited and celebrated ingenuity and collaboration that define our industry, a spirit that is fully embodied here at Ascend. This spirit of collaboration proved foundational to establishing the freedom of access to international air and maritime domains. In concert with the service provided by our United States Air Force and Navy, our nation is able to continue flourishing through these domains. This dual aspect of civilian and military collaboration, connection, and innovation is what has secured the global commons, a concept that extends to space, the final frontier. As the space domain has evolved over the years, our society's reliance on space has been woven into the fabric of our lives. Never before in our history has space been more critical to the future of our nation. Satellites underpin our economic prosperity, enabling everything from transportation and communication to agriculture and finance. Likewise, space has become the backbone of our national security, protecting our warfighters and our way of life. Today, our freedom of access to the global commons is threatened by adversaries who seek to deny our use of space. This represents a direct challenge not only to our national security, but to the entire engine of scientific progress and economic prosperity that the freedom of access to space enables. Although the United States remains the world's preeminent space force, China continues. Well, you know what? I completely skipped the front of my speech. I'm like, why haven't I thanked everybody? All right, sorry about that. I'm going to go backwards. Thank you, Christy. I'm reading my speech. I'm like, my speechwriter did me dirty. No, I did myself dirty. So yesterday you got to hear from Colonel Medeiros and the panelists on missile defense, and it looks like day 2 is going to be awesome as well. So it's my honor to be here today on behalf of General Saltzman, the Chief of Space Operations. He sends me to the coolest places. I got to go to Nashville for him. I got to go to Vegas for him. So anytime he doesn't want to do a speech, he usually calls me, and that's all right. So it truly is my honor to be here with you all on behalf of General Saltzman. So thanks for having me here. Now I'll get back to my speech. My speechwriter, Alex, is sitting up at the front table. He's going to yell at me. He's like, "Sir, you skipped your introduction." Okay. Although the United States Space Force remains the world's preeminent space force, China continues to actively develop and field a wide range of hostile technologies that put our nation's assets at risk. China's actions over the last few years point to an ever-increasing emphasis on their military use of space. For example, last April, China realigned their military space segment to stand up their rocket force that is dedicated to the space domain. Today, they have over 1,000 satellites in orbit, 200 of which were launched just in the last year. These satellites include dual-use, highly maneuverable systems in orbit, revealing the speed at which China is advancing their technological and operational acumen. Through the use of these satellites, their operators are gaining experience and developing tactics and procedures that could enable a formidable on-orbit counter-space arsenal. These tactics and procedures include corkscrew maneuvers around a single satellite, showing potential signals collection capability, and rendezvous and proximity operations at approach distances of less than half a mile, while traveling at 17,000 miles per hour, essentially at a face-to-face distance. These actions do not exhibit peaceful use of space. They exhibit hostile and militaristic use. To support these experiments, China has also heavily invested in their space launch capability, with several commercial providers coming online in the next few years. Make no mistake, China is no longer a future threat. They are a threat today, a threat we must stay in front of. Your United States Space Force is doing that every day. Since our establishment in 2019, our mission has been clear and vital: to secure our nation's interests in, from, and to space. The gravity of our mission cannot be overstated. As General Saltzman emphasized in our Space Force Truths, our capabilities are not just a collection of supporting activities. They are critical to the Joint Force and the American way of life. And that reality presents us with the imperative that we must defend our capabilities, or we will not be able to project power. We execute this critical mission across 3 core functions. The first is to maintain space superiority in order to protect the Joint Force and our nation from space and counter-space threats. The second is global mission operations from space. We execute this by delivering operations like satellite communications, position navigation and timing, and missile warning and tracking activities. And finally, is assuring our access to space through our launch capabilities and range and control network infrastructure. But this complex global mission, spanning from the launch pad to geosynchronous orbit and beyond, doesn't happen on its own. It's made possible by the skill, dedication, and vigilance of our Guardians. Through the Guardians' efforts, we're able to provide a safe and stable environment, one that bolsters our nation's scientific progress and economic prosperity. That stability is what allows us to pursue the very kinds of missions and research being discussed right here at Ascend. It's the work being done on powerful new platforms like the Orbital Edge Accelerator to innovate in low Earth orbit. It's the grand vision of human exploration from Artemis missions that will take us back to the moon and further with deep space exploration. It's the groundbreaking science that sounds like fiction, from studying genes in space to engineering the sci-fi future with concepts like infrastructure on the moon. And for us, it's about accelerating defense decisions across the evolving threat landscape in space to ensure all of this progress continues to be secure and uninterrupted. As the primary acquisition hub of the Space Force, Space Systems Command is responsible for acquiring, developing, and delivering resilient capabilities to secure our nation's interests in, from, and to space. The space domain today, as we know, is ever-changing and rapidly evolving. As such, we understand the speed at which we deliver warfighter capabilities. Our adversaries are not waiting for us. The threat is immediate, sophisticated, and aggressive. It's imperative that we embrace innovation, the ingenuity of our industry partners, and collaborate in order to bridge the gap between visionary ideas and mission-ready solutions. To achieve this at SSC, we've transformed the business of space acquisitions, with recent awards being significantly faster than before. Partnering closer than ever with our allied nations, joint agencies, and most importantly, with you, we're maintaining our competitive advantage and moving faster than the threat. We are fully invested in energizing the unity of effort internally within the Space Force and externally with industry and academia. Our Space Force is evolving from the establishment phase into a phase where we begin to forge a purpose-built service, matching form with function to achieve unified mission readiness. Through this, unified mission readiness organizes our Space Force activities around mission areas instead of functional specialties, strengthening unity of command for readiness and energizing unity of effort for capability development. Less than 2 weeks ago, we stood up 2 new system deltas at Space Systems Command. The first was Systems Delta 84, focused on missile warning and tracking, led by Colonel Stevie Medeiros, who you heard from yesterday. The second was Systems Delta 810, focusing on space-based sensing and targeting, led by Colonel Dane Banish. Over the course of the next few months, we will stand up 6 more system deltas, completing SSC's transition to better energize our unity of effort. Though Space Systems Command is young, our legacy extends beyond 70 years. Throughout those 70 years, the commercial sector has been the frontline innovators, and that's not different today. In 2024, the Space Force released the Commercial Space Strategy, aiming to enhance our nation's competitive advantage through commercial partnerships. Since then, we've dedicated significant efforts and resources towards industry outreach, strengthening existing partnerships, and establishing relationships with new businesses through our Commercial Space Office, or COMSO. The goal of COMSO is to leverage the full force of industry innovation with speed, cost efficiency, and minimal duplication of effort. Through these efforts, we are able to deliver efficient and sufficient commercial space capabilities to the warfighter, while also providing opportunities to bridge the gap between ideas and reality. Since its inception, COMSO has shown great potential and has garnered strong support from congressional defense committees, resulting in additional collaboration opportunities through our SSC Front Door, SpaceWorks, and the Commercial Augmentation Space Reserve, or CASR, to name a few. If you're interested in collaborating with and connecting with SSC, I recommend your first stop be the SSC Front Door. Later today, you're lucky, Victor Vigliotti and MJ Jones from the front door are going to be speaking, and I recommend that you make it a point to introduce yourselves and figure out how to connect with them. This front door is committed to helping all industry partners explore opportunities to collaborate with the Space Force and connect them with mission area owners to provide information on upcoming opportunities. These opportunities range from programs of record to small business innovations research and small business technology transfer. Moreover, the SSC front door works with our mission area owners to host industry days and reverse industry days. This provides a two-way transparency where we can communicate our needs while industry can communicate their ideas and capabilities. Side by side with the front door is our Space Force's arm of AFWorks, aptly known as SpaceWorks. It transitions agile, affordable, and accelerated capabilities by teaming innovative technology developers with airmen and Guardian talent. Their key focus areas include collaboration and connection with industry to relentlessly explore and validate dual-use commercial capabilities. Our SpaceWorks team also provides assistance in bridging the gap between prototype development and commercialization. This assistance is provided through programs like Strategic Funding Increase, or STRATFI, and Tactical Funding Increase, or TACFI. Through TACFI and STRATFI, promising industry partners are connected with private investors and government mission area owners to maximize investments. Most recently, our COMSO team has kicked off the Commercial Augmentation Space Reserve, or CASR. The goal with CASR is to ensure the Space Force has access to mature commercial services and capabilities in times of crisis or conflict. This is the Space Force version of how the Air Force executes the Civil Reserve Air Fleet with commercial airlines in wartime. We're setting up contracts with commercial companies so we can increase our speed to need. At SSC, we recently completed our second ever war game with commercial companies to iterate and improve on the activation process and simulate how many commercial companies can contribute in a time of crisis or conflict. Through it all, what has become more apparent is when we clearly communicate capability gaps or urgent needs with potential funding, we receive positive responses. Today, American companies, often venture-backed companies, are eager to contribute and are becoming more and more engaged. But this will only continue to be successful with ongoing engagement, open dialogue, and technical exchanges. And that's exactly what we've been doing. Earlier this year, in conjunction with the Director of National Intelligence, Department of Defense Space Policy, Space Force Intelligence, and the Commercial Integration Cell, the SSC front doors launched Orbital Watch, a new initiative designed to enhance unclassified threat information sharing with commercial space companies. Orbital Watch aims to empower industry partners to proactively mitigate risks to their space systems, inform their own investments, and enhance overall space intelligence and operations. In an era of increasing threats, Orbital Watch is the culmination of partnerships with various organizations within the government intelligence community. Nevertheless, the ultimate goal is to harness our competitive advantage through two-way threat sharing with industry partners, and this is being accomplished with a two-phase rollout. Phase one is focused on outbound dissemination that provides industry with assessments of evolving risks in the space domain. Once that is complete, we'll enter phase two, where we will reach full operational capability and introduce a secure communication portal. This will enable the two-way threat information sharing between the government and industry partners deemed critical to Space Force operations. Within the next few weeks, the Orbital Watch Tiger team will take off with a goal to ensure that we're coordinating requirements across relevant information sharing stakeholders. Orbital Watch is fostering a more secure and resilient space domain through collaborative threat information sharing, empowering both commercial operators and government partners to proactively mitigate risk and safeguard critical space assets. They are a key enabler of our Space Force's commercial space strategy that will ensure our nation and our way of life remain protected from the fast-growing space threats. So I can't stress enough, our scientific progress and economic prosperity is dependent on the freedom to use the commons and include the space domain. As the space domain continues to change and evolve, we must continue to bridge the gap between visionary concepts and tangible technological realities. Make no mistake, our adversaries are not slowing down, so neither should we. We must leverage our competitive advantage to move faster than the threat through commercial, agency, allied, and academic partnerships. Together, we can ensure that the United States remains at the forefront of capabilities in the final frontier. By doing so, your guardians will be able to defend against space and counter space threats to allow the continued joint use of space freely. Thank you for your continued support in the United States Space Force and your dedication to innovation ingenuity, and collaboration. Our future is very dynamic, and together we can protect it and continue our progress and prosperity. I'm looking forward to the fireside chat, followed by your questions. Thank you, and Semper Supra.
Thank you so much. I'll let you get settled. Really intriguing comments. I think we can all definitely resonate with space is the backbone of our way of life, but the threat is real, and it's key to how we mitigate that. I do want to remind you to use the QR code to ask a question. I'm going to have to ask for some help, though, because I've done something to the iPad, and the questions will not come to me unless someone comes and helps me get that back up. So feel free to ask questions, and hopefully we'll get them queued up for me for the end of our session. All right, well, I get the pleasure of asking you a few additional questions based on some of the themes that you talked about, and I want to start with acquisition. What are the key acquisitional challenges facing the U.S. Space Force today, and how do you see that evolving in the next 10 years?
Great. I'm going to answer that two ways, from an operational lens and then actual specific challenges of executing the acquisition mission. Over the last few years, the Space Force has seen its budget double from about $15 billion at its inception to about $30 billion. And now with reconciliation, we're looking at about $40 billion. The emphasis has really been focused on those specific requirements. The first pivot was missile warning and missile track, with the collaborative efforts with the Missile Defense Agency, Space Development Agency, and our space sensing mission portfolio. Missile warning and track and contributions to missile defense are the Space Force's contribution to strategic deterrence. That's our part to that. The next pivot that you saw was absolutely focused on the joint warfighter, the Army, the Navy, and the Marines, in particular satellite communications, and making sure that warfighters have access to secure comms at the closest contested region of regional fight, say Second Island chain, if we were talking about Asia. Yep. And now where you're seeing the pivot and the emphasis, and it kind of alluded to in the Space Force truths, is space control, and you're starting to hear a lot more people talk about space control openly, space domain awareness, and that's not just ground-based, that's also space-based space domain awareness. And then as an enabler, a big emphasis area for General Saltzman is operational test and training infrastructure, or OTTI, predominantly supporting Space Test and Readiness Command, and making sure that our Guardians have the tools and the ability to train against a thinking adversary. There's still a lot of policy that makes it challenging to exercise and test with real-world assets. So these ranges and cyber capabilities are incredibly important. So that's a focus on the mission area. Launch remains equally important. We are successfully executing the NSSL, National Security Space Lift Phase 3 effort, and we're already starting planning for Phase 4. Yeah. Excited to bring on more launch providers. From our perspective, more competition leads to extra access to space as well as more effective pricing. So that area will remain important as well. Underpinning kind of all of that is Space C2 and making sure that the weapon systems that are presented to General Whiting at Space Command can effectively be command and controlled should we need them in times of crisis or conflict. So that's an important area as well. And then continuing, again, the Joint Warfighter, PNT, SATCOM. So those are the mission areas with General Saltzman's priorities. From an acquisition perspective, frankly, my challenge as the commander of SSC is implementing the administration's guidance on a smaller federal workforce. SSC had a significant number of civilians take the deferred resignation program across multiple career fields, and the folks that were leaving have decades of experience. A re-emphasis on Guardian officer accession processes, which send them to a common military experience, a common operational assignment, means that acquirers will come to SSC in a few years rather than right out of school. So a shaping workforce is a big emphasis for me to make sure that we can execute all this money that we're getting. I think it's perfectly realistic to say that getting a $10 billion bump, a third of your budget increase, is not trivial. So we're going to be really focused on executing that effectively and efficiently, and focused on organizing SSC as a field command that supports the acquisition mission. In 10 years, I think the budget, at least with reconciliation and the administration's priorities, we're going to see a continued growing budget, and the appetite for the capabilities isn't going to change. But when you listen to General Purdy, who's the acting service acquisition executive, and you watch what we're doing with partners, I'll use GSAP as an example. The GSAP follow-on effort that Brian McLean's organization is running is getting after commercial providers and commercial buses, and going back to a much simpler architecture. It lets us have a lot more satellites cheaper, and it's going to be faster and easier to replace. So I think you're going to see that change over the next 10 years. We're learning a lot from Space RCO and SDA on how they acquire. SSC is using a lot of mid-tier acquisition now, and a lot of rapid prototyping. So I think in that 10-year time frame, you're going to see a significant shift away from a lot of large legacy exquisite constellations. We're still going to have some of those. Those are important for certain mission areas, but you're going to see more commercial, more smaller industrial base, larger numbers, shorter design life. And then I'll say the next big challenge is the need for a truck, right? The space lift. If we can't get these satellites to space, they do us no good. The demands on the eastern and western range are significant, particularly with our commercial launch providers. So fundamentally changing how we do space lift, and increasing the spaceports, increasing throughput. We've got funding to do additional encapsulation, private-public partnerships to do satellite encapsulation. Looking at port infrastructure, how do we get commodities off the base? A little bit of a longer-term project. The challenge is if you've got trucks driving around with, fuel or bad chemicals, you can't launch. Yeah. So, and the launch cadence means we can't always keep pausing. And then our launch vehicles just keep getting bigger and bigger from all of our major launch providers. So that's going to be a big challenge, and a big focus area is staying in front of that curve, making sure our commercial launch providers can execute their mission too.
Thank you. I always love your focus on the people, right? It's such dynamic times, but we need to bring our workforce along with us, and we need to think about that proactively. I'll touch on the SDA topic.
Okay.
Right, we learned a lot through SDA. I think it helped flex what was possible. I see Dr. Jamie Moran in the audience. I talked to him about it a few weeks ago, and it did help us see what was possible as far as going fast, doing it differently, multiple cooperative partners. I think we learned a lot, and I think to your point, it's a good way to jump off and do it differently in other places.
Yeah, I had the sincere pleasure of leading the Space Development Agency temporarily earlier in the calendar year, and learned a lot about the organization, learned a lot about their mission. They will tell you that their first focus is to be an acquisition disruptor. And they absolutely are. If you can do a source selection on 120-day centers, that's pretty impressive. Yeah. Increasing the industrial base, absolutely. I can say that SDA has arguably done more for the space industrial base with new providers than folks have in a long time. And bringing up non-traditional companies, non-traditional systems, really challenging the supply chain. I don't want to speak for Derek, but the supply chain is a big issue for all of us, but particularly for organizations working with these smaller companies. And then finally, and arguably the most important, is providing warfighter capability. The proliferated warfighting space architecture is incredibly important to the future for our missile warning and missions coming down the pipe. So yeah, and as I mentioned, they have absolutely mastered mid-tier acquisition, and we learn a lot from them. We have a combined program office with them, along with MDA, on the hybrid missile warning architecture. So a lot of collaboration, a lot of teaming.
Yeah, necessary. So acquisition reform is on the mind of many in industry and government. What is your vision for equipping the Guardians of the Future, and what steps is the U.S. Space Force taking to achieve this?
So if you've been watching the defense committees with the fiscal year 26 NDAA, the SPEED and the FORGE Act are very upfront, and you see it a lot in the marks with the HASC and the SASC. I think General Purdy is on the Hill this week with Honorable Duffy and the other service acquisition executives talking about acquisition reform. We actually welcome some of those ideas. They are groundbreaking. I've heard the act reform that we're going to see out of the 26 NDA compared to Goldwater Nichols of the 80s. It's that foundational and changing. I would offer the Space Force is, in a lot of ways, is almost in front of it and pathfinding some of those areas. This idea of mission-focused portfolios where our PEOs are not just focused on a program, but an entire mission area, and the creation of the Systems Delta that has unity of mission with a Mission Delta commander and a Systems Delta commander. So at the lowest levels, lowest echelons of command, our commanders and our teams are collaborating and solving problems. Before, if there was an issue with an operational system or a developmental system, it took me and Rock Miller at the 3-star level to be the action officer solving a problem. And now what we're seeing is at the lowest levels of the organization, the collaboration and the teaming is really pushing that forward. The government acceptance of OCX is an example of that. The operational use assessment of Atlas is another great example of that. But back to the forge and the speed, the idea of the portfolio nature of a program executive, more a portfolio executive, not a program executive. And then taking a look at requirements and how we do requirements. We have a lot of conversations with General Saltzman about test and operational assessment and requirements. And he gives a great analogy that I like to share. It's his story, not mine. And the example is our fitness test. So if the requirement is you run a mile in 8 minutes, and you do that test 5 times, and 3 times you run a 7-minute, 50-second mile, and 2 times you run an 8-minute, 1-second mile. The question is, did you pass the test or not? Well, clearly you've met the spirit and intent of the requirement, but the way we write our requirements, the way we do our test, you will have failed that test. And a lot of times we do it to ourselves. So we've got to fundamentally think about a better way to assess, write our requirements, and let that drive the funding. He talks about force design. He talks about it in terms of 3 different. It's the objective force, the force that we need, the programmed force, the force that's in the budget, as well as the fielded force, the capability that's in the field. And the delta between those forces is risk to mission in his mind. I'm not going to say a lot about Futures Command. We're making a lot of progress. You'll see it, some more information probably at AFA National in September. But the idea of Futures is to make sure that we're working closely with the as-is, the to-be, all of the people that spend Space Force money, and to get after those needs. And the flexibility that we're going to get out of Speed and Forge are going to really drive how we get after requirements differently and prioritize our budgets.
Yeah. And certainly when we go to proliferated constellations, we can't be testing the exact same way that we have with our exquisite systems, and it can scale across all of the mission components.
Yeah. And there's policy implications too. Proliferated, there's a lot of people looking at, how do you certify a proliferated constellation? Particularly in the missile warning mission area, historically we've certified nodes, a radar, a command and control system. But now that you have hundreds, if not thousands, of satellites providing 1s and 0s to a warfighter, how do you certify that and allow the National Command Authority to take action on that data? Yeah. So it's not trivial.
Yeah. And how is it okay if one goes out of service, continue to operate, right? Maybe self-heal. All right, well, switching themes to collaboration. As the intersection between military and commercial space capabilities becomes more complex, how is Space Force acquisition responding to ensure operational relevance and resilient capability?
Yeah, I alluded a little bit to it in my comments. We truly embrace this commercial strategy. I actually had the privilege of being on the writing side of that when I was in my previous role at the Pentagon, and it's been published. And if you read that, and it's still available online, it talks a lot about inherently governmental versus what's commercial, and it's a trade because inherently governmental means it's either going to be a civilian or a military guardian. Inherently military would imply a uniformed guardian. And then there's things that we are willing to accept the military risk of having a commercial provider, balanced with the need to develop, train guardians. The example is, why don't we contract out flying satellite buses? To a certain extent, you could. The military should still fly the payload, but what about the bus? But at some point, we still want to be able to develop and train operators who know how to fly satellites. So that's a balance there. But when General Gutlein was in my role as the SSC commander, his mantra was exploit, buy, build. And what he meant by that was exploit what you have, take advantage of existing capabilities, existing contract vehicles, buy what you can, meaning if it's commercially available, buy it that way, and then build only what you must, what has to be developed and might require, because of exquisite requirements, a traditional acquisition program. Over the last couple of years, what we've seen is a pivot. A lot of this is driven by how we do programming and the PPBE process and how we get money in. And the challenge is, by the time a PEO gets the money, the ACT strategy is already built, and it's too late to implement a commercial capability. So if we bake commercial and we bake allies and partners in upfront in that future force design that I talked about in the context of futures, so we know it's going to be a commercial capability, then when it comes time to actually execute an acquisition program, the building blocks are there, and it's fundamentally easier to do. So we're pushing, and COMSO is really pushing to work with all of the program executive officers, not just in SSC, but across the service, to consider commercial first, and then make it part of the acquisition strategy. When the Resilient GPS effort kicked off under the Quick Start authorities in the previous administration, the GPS organization awarded 4 contracts using mid-tier acquisition, and I believe 3 of the 4 providers were non-traditional commercial companies, not traditional defense companies. So that's one example. The responsive space with Victus Nox, those series, another example of non-traditional launch providers and non-traditional satellite providers. Support we do for tactical SRT, where we provide operational planning products to the combatant commanders, most recently in Texas to Northcom with the flooding, is a recent example. All of those are where we're fundamentally changing how we use commercial companies and then build that into our budget. So it should become first nature, that it's a commercial answer first. And that's not to say that there's not a role for traditional defense contracting and traditional primes. Absolutely, there's partnerships there. So I think you're going to see that in the next couple of years really become the norm. Honorable Duffy at A&S is very much interested in that. When you look at Secretary Hegseth's priorities and the emphasis and the funding, when you look at the ACT strategy that General Gutlein is putting together for Golden Dome, you're going to see an emphasis on non-traditional partners partnering with traditional partners. So how the best of both breeds.
Yeah, that makes sense. You talked about making sure the budget happens at the beginning and early enough. What other vulnerabilities or threats do you see to really moving into that shift with the acquisition policy?
Yeah, and the big vulnerability, and this is what the Global Watch is getting after, is commercial companies may not have the infrastructure to protect themselves. They may not even understand the risks that are inherent in doing that type of work with the government. Every satellite, every person becomes a target as far as the adversaries are concerned. So how do we best inform these partners? How do we cyber defend these partners? How do we do that information sharing to make sure that they understand it? And all of these agreements, the CASR agreements, the Global Watch, those are all going to let us do that information sharing and help defend. General Whiting, Commander of Space Command, he has a responsibility to defend U.S. interests in space. In my mind, that includes our launch companies and our satellite companies and their capabilities. So there's certainly an opportunity there. And then if we include these commercial capabilities as part of our kill chains, whether it's a sensor or a communications architecture, we become dependent on them. We need to make sure that they're going to be there in crisis or conflict.
Do you think? Oh, sorry.
So, no, I was just going to say. So I think as we start to do a lot with commercial companies, just making sure that they're ready and understand the risks, but at the same time, we do everything we can to make sure that they're going to be safe. Sorry, you were going to ask.
I'm sorry I interrupted you. Do you think we're progressing well along that path to help those companies with the cyber vulnerabilities, et cetera?
I do. Probably not to the scale we need to be, but we're putting the mechanisms in place to ensure that we can.
Yeah. Well, it's dynamic. It's always changing, right? So we'll all have to stay up to speed. Switching over to more technology focused, what role do you see technology playing in overcoming acquisition challenges?
I think it's huge. It's always the very traditional valley of death. Someone's got a really great idea. How do you get it into operations? We have this conversation a lot with Star Command and Space Operations Command. As if there's something that's fundamentally game-changing, we don't have time for a traditional acquisition program. We want to get that into operations as quickly as we can. We're seeing tremendous partnerships with organizations like SCO, the Strategic Capabilities Office, DIU, SpaceWorks, where we can get these novel ideas, get it in the hands of the warfighter, demonstrate the effectiveness through a war game or an exercise, and then rapidly get it into operations, even though maybe all the abilities aren't there, and we can get after that. So there's a lot of tools that let us do that. That's another area that Futures is going to take a really hard focus area on, and to kind of sharpen the pencil, if you will, on that, and then to make sure that it's feeding mission requirements and mission capabilities that the Space Force needs. I'll use an example. You hear Space Command talk about dynamic space operations or maneuver without regret a lot. We have contracts that are going to do some demonstrations with on-orbit servicing, removal of a dead satellite, as an example. There are companies that provide an on-orbit fueling capability. All important capabilities, perhaps maybe not as important as space domain awareness or space control, but modest investments from the Space Force getting after technology. I personally think it's a 5 to 15-year problem. We have dead satellites today. We have satellites that aren't capable of refueling, but we're doing refueling experiments. And then I think the next generation of satellites are going to solve that problem for itself. We're going to have novel propulsion. There's industry looking at safe nuclear propulsion. They're looking at low fuel electric propulsion. Yep. So I think in a generation of constellations, it won't be a challenge. And then when you balance that with more cost-effective, cheaper satellites, where it might be cheaper to replace them. I always, whenever somebody comes and talks to me about SAML, or space mobility and logistics, I always caution them that it's not a free ride to space. Somebody could have the absolute best gas tank for GEO, but for me, that's a high-energy direct orbit injection. That's hundreds of millions of dollars for space lift. So I always caution companies and folks interested in these capabilities to never forget about launch, because it's not free to the Space Force. So sometimes when you start to consider launch, the business case doesn't close. But absolutely, those are the types of technologies and capabilities that are of interest. And then if it's a game changer, how do we rapidly get it into use? Yeah.
I was intrigued when you mentioned trucks early on. Can you talk a little more about those launch opportunities in the future?
The NSSL tracks?
Yeah.
So there's two lanes. Lane one is typically smaller launch vehicles, but some of our bigger launch providers are in that lane one. Generally, you're not going to use a lane one to get to GEO. Maybe a lower mission risk where we're more willing to use a launch vehicle that maybe doesn't have hundreds of flights.
Okay.
The lane two is the more traditional assured access to space, national security missions, larger missions, supporting the intel community, supporting large NASA, and then some of our more exquisite DoD satellites, and then even our I hate to say routine, but things like GPS satellites and SATCOM satellites. That's the more traditional lane two. We have two certified providers right now. We have SpaceX and ULA, getting ready to launch on ULA here in the coming weeks, and then working very closely with Blue Origin to get them certified as a lane two service provider. And then neat about the NSSL Phase 3 contract is our ability to on-ramp new launch providers and to keep awarding every year. So a new launch provider has a chance to get in on our business every year. The downside is the more launch providers we get, the more congested the spaceports get, and that becomes its own challenge, as making sure that everybody has a place to launch from. Every year we get a report to Congress on new spaceports and how we do a better job of using other places, not just Vandenberg and Patrick.
Yep, got it. Thank you. Let's switch now to talking about allies. How is the U.S. Space Force working with allies to facilitate interoperability and cooperation in an active space environment?
Yeah, incredibly important. Air Marshal Godfrey is a British exchange officer in the Pentagon. He works for General Saltzman. He's been instrumental in really pushing our relationships. And then we just published the Allied strategy. Much like we had the commercial strategy, the Space Force just published an Allied strategy. And Air Marshal Godfrey was instrumental in that. And it really lays out that cooperation and planning. And much like we want commercial to be baked into the force design, we want allies and partners to be baked into the force design. They have to be a forethought, not an afterthought. The advantages are the entanglement that it brings us. It will make the adversary pause if an attack on a capability includes an ally. It might make them pause. It saves money for the United States if somebody else is spending a little bit of money. It gives us access regionally to some important areas around the world if these allies and partners allow us to field our systems or we sell our systems to them. SSC has a large foreign military sale portfolio, doubling about every year.
Oh, wow.
In magnitude of programs, a lot of interest in working with us and our industrial partners. Information sharing remains a challenge. As much as we talk about it, and Yes Foreign and Five Eyes, unfortunately we're working on declassification and lowering classification, but it's still a significant hurdle that we're trying to get through. The President just named a nominee for DoD space policy. That person will have a significant role in getting after that as well. But yeah, absolutely critical.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we'll see a huge change in that information sharing posture as we go through the next 3 years?
I hope so. In the area of space control, electronic warfare, we've seen some policy changes, at least for our Five Eyes partners, with the growth of the CSPO with the combined space, adding other countries, Norway, Italy, and Japan, with the growth of Space Command's Operation Olympic Defender, which is a named operation in support of Space Command with allies and partners. It's going to drive the need for that, absolutely. Yeah. And as I mentioned, General Saltzman and others, you hear people talking about space control openly. And then even this administration, some of the executive orders and some of the capabilities they're talking about in an unclassified forum are groundbreaking. Yeah. So that's what we have to do, is to drive the conversation into the open from the beginning.
Yep, agree. Well, here representing industry, why don't we pivot to a question of how can industry help you meet your objectives? And maybe we could do it in the vein of traditional defense contractors and more the non-traditional, like you've talked about. Yeah,
I think the most important thing that you can do is communicate. When I first took the job about a year and a half ago, and anytime I meet with industry, and many of you know this, you can quote me, the first words out of my mouth are usually, I have no acquisition authority, I have no budget, and I have no programs. I truly am responsible for organizing the command to support the acquisition mission. And I had a deputy PEO, and I won't name them, ask me, well, then why do you meet with industry? And my tongue-in-cheek answer was, because you don't listen to them. So what do I give you? I give you an ear, because I still have, I'd like to think, a lot of influence. Yes. Folks know that if you're in Los Angeles, you're welcome to come see me. I still go on the circuit, so to speak. I'll be at AFA, I'll be at AMOS, I'll be at Space Power, I'll be at Space Symposium. You are absolutely welcome to get on my calendar. I encourage you to ask early, for a 20-minute speed dating, because those time slots do fill up. But reach out to the engagement team, reach out to me, reach out to my aide. and I am happy to meet with you. So that's the first thing, is communicate with us. And if you feel you're not being heard by the acquisition teams, let me know, and I'll have a conversation with them. Tell us your good ideas. That's really important too, with the industry days, the reverse industry days. We've got space industry days in Los Angeles in October. I think it's the 22nd and 23rd. I'll be there as well. That's another opportunity for you to meet one-on-one with the folks. General Gutlein's going to have several industry days with Golden Dome. I think he announced earlier this week that there's going to be one at MDA. There's going to be one in Los Angeles. So lots of opportunities to engage with us. Tell us your ideas and make sure that folks are finding a good pair. That front door that I mentioned, and I don't know if Vic's in the audience, but he's going to be here later today. That front door will pair you up. If you have, this is more for the non-traditionals. If you've got something that you're just not sure who to work with, the front door is going to marry you up with the right program executive, the right program manager for what you want to talk about. You know, the bigger companies, the traditional defense companies, you know, continue to use your influence on the Hill. I'm not going to ask you to lobby for budget. I'm not allowed to do that. But you can absolutely lobby on the Hill for some of these new acquisition authorities, the Forge Act, the Speed Act, and how we can keep going faster and be more effective. So I would say those are probably the big three. Everybody should communicate.
Yep.
I'm your ear, and I'm sincere about that. You can reach out to me anytime. And if you come see me, I'm going to drag in the appropriate acquisition folks. It's not just going to be me. Because again, I don't have any money, I don't have any programs. So talking to just me doesn't do you any good. And then keep pushing for the ACT reform, and then make sure you're working with our commercial team on partnering up with your capabilities. There are absolutely examples, and I'm not going to give specifics because they're unique to different companies, where we've had a really amazing idea and we've pushed to do a space test using the space test program to accelerate demonstrating a capability and leveraging some of the work that NASA does.
Any advice for our researchers and academic fellows and attendees?
Yeah, so the Space Force has, on the academic side, a significant partnership program. We call it the University Partnership Program, a couple of dozen universities. You see it in our professional military education with our intermediate and senior level with Johns Hopkins. The General Saltzman just approved a captain level leadership course called the Captain's Leadership Course. That's also going to be a partnership with the university. It hasn't been announced yet, and in fact they have to do that selection. So on the PME side, strong connection there. The UPP is a strong connection. I happen to be the champion for USC. So I spent a lot of time with USC. I've put a guardian on faculty at USC, so I pay their salary and they work for the university. So we're always looking for connections. Strong connection with AFRL, with the space-based labs in Ohio and Albuquerque. And then again, the SBIRs and the SITR efforts with SpaceWorks. We kicked off, we call it Fight Tonight, which is a SSC effort. Every year we do it, where guardians have the chance to compete for funds for money. So a very junior guardian, civilian or officer, or enlisted, can get money outside of a program to work on a project that's of interest to them. And then this year, SpaceWorks is going to double the funding. So if somebody wins $2 million, it ends up being $4 million. We're not allowed to have contractor-led projects, but contractors are allowed to be part of those projects. So I'd encourage you, if you've got ideas, talk to your program teams and encourage them to compete for that. Ask the question one more time, please.
Just academics and research.
Yes, academic research. So yeah, I would say that foundational research is important. General Saltzman and the Secretary, Dr. Mink, again, I can't emphasize enough the strong ties to an operational need. That's the big thing. And we're looking at faster and sooner capabilities. You know, some examples. We've got the Oracle system, which is looking at cislunar. That's a strong partnership with AFRL. You know, systems that are a little bit further out and maybe not our missionary today, but will be our missionary in the future. So strong missionary connection, work with AFRL, SCO, DIU, through the partnership university programs, work work directly with the universities. I happened to be in New England a couple of weeks ago and got a chance to visit some universities. So it's some really strong partnerships and accelerators there as well.
So,
yeah.
Great. Well, we're hitting the end of our time here. Why don't we end with a people focus? So we have a lot of young talent, emerging talent here at this conference. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah. So the Space Force has 4 core values: connection, character, commitment, and courage. One that I talk about a lot is connection. And one of my advisors, Dr. J.W. Womack, talks about the action verb of connecting. And I would offer that's what one of the primary focuses of this conference is connection and connecting and the networking opportunities. And I tell my young guardians this as well, is the relationships you build and the friendships and connections you make are going to be important to your future of your career, regardless of what you choose to do. So I would emphasize while you're here and you have the opportunity, there's a lot of old friends in this room that are looking around or who have already said hi to me. Make it a point to introduce yourselves to them. And then look for opportunities. How can you fit into our ecosystem? While, yes, we are drawing down our civilian workforce, we're still hiring. We're just focusing our critical needs. Certain career fields, I would tell you, of course, engineering. If you know how to do orbital mechanics and you have a clearance, you probably have a job. If you want to be a contracting officer, I will hire you and I will train you how to be a contracting officer. If you want to be a shipbuilder, I won't hire you, but we need shipbuilders because not everybody's going to go to college. So find where you fit. I tell my kids, I have 4 adult children, I tell them, be happy, contribute to society. The same thing holds, but I'm going to bring it back to connecting. So for the junior workforce that's here, make some connections with some mentors that are here, and be willing to do fun stuff. And if you do aspire for a stint in federal government, we'd love to have you. You don't have to stay. My oldest did 6 years as a military civilian contracting officer and is now in industry. My daughter is a civilian in the Air Force and is looking at some other opportunities. You have ways to serve and not just in a uniform. So we'd love to have you on the team.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks.
Any closing comments?
No, I appreciate the opportunity. Like I said, General Saltzman sends me to some really cool places. Like I said, got to go to Vegas, got to go to Nashville. It's a privilege to spend time with you. I'm sincere about connecting with me. All right, you are welcome to reach out to me directly, reach out to my team. I want to hear from you, and I want to make connections for you as well. And yeah, I hope the rest of the conference is great. Thank you.
Thank you. This has certainly been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Did you get your tablet fixed?
No.
All right, we need a tablet technician. Or we're going to go old school, and I'm going to take them from the podium, even though you've probably already sent your QR codes in. All right. How about we're going to do this. I'm going to ask you to moderate who asked the questions, and then I'll answer them.
Okay.
So I guess raise your hand, stand up and shout. We'll repeat the question. We got one right here.
Hi, thanks for your talk. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
I wanted to ask, is there a way for us to secure the space domain and avoid escalating an arms race with Russia and China?
Yeah, so the question is there a way to secure the space domain without escalating an arms race with Russia and China? I think the answer is yes, but I'll say it's not easy either. The whole point of the military aspect of an instrument of national power is to allow time for the other instruments like diplomacy to work. So if we can make the adversary pause because we're holding them at risk because of a capability that we have, you've heard us, we haven't ever talked about specific capabilities, but you're hearing us talk more openly that we have capabilities to protect and defend our interests as well as hold adversaries at risk. So that's the whole point, is to cause the adversaries to pause and to avoid that escalation as well. Some fascinating developments with some new ideas, impacts to strategic deterrence, all part of that calculus and conversation as well. So the short answer is I believe there is. We still have a ways to go. We want to be able to have a spectrum of capabilities in all orbital regimes that are responsive and some that might be a little bit longer to respond to, but you know what I would do? Hey, Jamie, have you talked yet? Is Dr. Morin still here? You've already spoken? I was going to say, ask Jamie that question. Catch him on a coffee break. You know, he's with the aerospace policy think tank, if you will, and those are the types of things that they absolutely consider. But I believe yes. Sorry, Jamie.
Another question? It's a little hard to see, so wave your hand if so.
Or stand up. I don't see any more. Oh, in the
This
back.
one.
Space Force particularly concerned with orbitals, or are you doing any deep space planning to support them?
Yeah, so is the Space Force concerned with the traditional orbital regimes, or are we doing any work with deep space and other non-traditionals? It is of interest to us. It's not the immediate focus. I mentioned the FRL Oracle program, which is doing cislunar. We're very interested in that. A good rule of thumb with the moon is if it's on the moon, it's NASA. If it's around the moon, then we have an interest. We are interested in extra geo, like pretty far away. There's some novel capabilities that you could take advantage of there. As far as Space Force in a true deep space role, I would offer not today. She's giving you a hint on how to fix the iPad. But I think in 2050, you know, I'm not going to be on active duty, but in 25 years, you know, we are rapidly approaching the limits of human air flight. But as we go deeper and deeper into space with human flight and, you know, Ender's Game, if you're a sci-fi fan, I think in 25 years, absolutely, you know, the Space Force, if it's not its own department, and this is just, you know, big picture, way out there thinking, it'll be the preponderance of the DAF as we fundamentally change where we're putting humans and their roles. So I'd say that's very futuristic, but not infeasible.
I just lost the screen on where the questions come. Any other questions in the room? I think they're giving us the hook in 1 minute. Oh, right there.
One of the great objectives of creating a Space Force was to give space, national security space, better visibility to the public and also the budgeting process. It certainly succeeded on the budgeting perspective and more resources coming away. My question is, as you look at some of the new Guardians coming into the force, are young people being motivated to join the Space Force as a consequence of seeing that greater visibility and the importance of it for our nation, or is it still primarily something that they're already interested in STEM, they're already interested there, maybe enlisting and they just choose Space Force? I guess, to what extent has the visibility helped with recruitment of great talent?
Yeah, so the question was, you know, arguably the Space Force was created to, and some of the issues were the awareness as well as the programming and budgeting, which has been successful. And what are we seeing with young Americans wanting to join the Space Force and the idea of STEM and contributing? We have never had a recruiting or retention problem. We assess about 500 to 600 enlisted Guardians a year and about 300 officer Guardians a year through all commissioning sources, the Academy, ROTC, and OTS. We interview every single young American that wants to be a Guardian. Every single one. That's the advantage of being a small military service. So we are seeing a lot of excitement. Our sessions, particularly our enlisted, it says they want us off the stage. So I am wrapping up. Typically are a little bit older, well college educated, coming in with a lot of cases of college degrees. So a big interest. Quite frankly, our biggest challenge is getting the American people in general to understand that the Space Force is a new separate military service. And it's an education campaign. You see the videos like Ad Astra out on YouTube where we're just talking about our mission and what we do. So that was our hook. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.